Welcome to Team 1's final project presentation covering FedEx Corporation for Management 7160 with Dr. Francis Fabian presiding. Team 1 project members include Denise Lee, Shannon Harris, George Vera, Wenming Wang, and Nick Allen. In August 1971, following a brief stint in the military, Fred Smith bought controlling interest in Arkansas Aviation Sales, located in Little Rock, Arkansas. While operating his new firm, he saw firsthand how difficult it was to get packages and other air freight delivered within 1 to 2 business days. The idea for Federal Express was born then, a company that was revolutionized global business practices and that now defines speed and reliability. Company headquarters later moved to Memphis, Tennessee, mostly due because of its central location within the U.S. and because the airport was rarely closed due to bad weather. The airport was also willing to make the necessary improvements for the operation and the additional space needed for the aircraft. Federal Express officially began operations on April 17, 1973, with only 389 team members. That evening, 14 small aircraft took off from Memphis and delivered 186 packages to 25 U.S. cities from Rochester, New York to Miami, Florida. Though the company did not show a profit until July 1975, it soon became the premier carrier of high-priority goods in the marketplace and set the standard for the express shipping industry it established. In the fiscal year of 1983, it reported $1 billion in revenue, making American business history as the first company to reach that financial hallmark inside 10 years of startup without mergers or acquisitions. FedEx has continued to expand its footprint both in the U.S. and international. It has been able to capture a large market share through its branding and innovative breakthroughs, mostly in the IT department. It has many strengths and some weaknesses, and for FedEx to continue to grow, the leadership has some very hard strategic decisions to make in order to overtake the expanding competition. Some of the topics that will be covered are as follows: measuring competitive advantages, evaluating FedEx's performance, a SWOT analysis, a value rareness, imitability.
The success of FedEx is undoubtedly well known. Therefore, it can be safely assumed that the company possesses great competitive advantages, which is defined as the ability of a firm to generate excess value to that of their competitors. But we cannot rest our argument on assumption. We must be able to prove it metrically. There are a number of methods to measuring competitive advantage, including simple accounting and the adjusted accounting measures. The simple accounting measures are very popular, as the information is widely available to the public. Such metrics include profitability, liquidity, activity, and leverage ratios. However, there are a number of limitations to this form of analysis. Managers can adjust their simple accounting performance to make it seem like the company is doing better than they actually are. It also falls victim to short-term bias, meaning that the long-term investments may appear to not generate any revenue. Managers will then consider the return on investments at the end of the time period as the revenue or return on investment, so it reflects a false positivity on the firm. Lastly, it is difficult to value intangible resources and capabilities. It is then a possibility that the computing accounting rates of return may be substantially overstating a firm's actual performance. Overall, it seems that the simple accounting measures cannot always be accurate. It is for these reasons that we opted to utilize the adjusted accounting measures of competitive advantage in evaluating FedEx's performance. Analyzing data provided by SEC filings, Yahoo Finance, and the company's annual report from the fiscal year of 2015, we were able to measure FedEx's performance using the adjusted accounting measures, including return on invested capital, weighted average cost of capital, economic profit, and Tobin's Q. The firm's return on invested capital was readily available, and found to be 7.29. But we needed to calculate invested capital and weighted average cost of capital in order to calculate economic profit. Invested capital was valued at over $30 billion, and weighted average cost of capital equaled 0.115. As you can see, FedEx's economic profit was extremely high. But what do these numbers tell us? What do these metrics say about FedEx's competitive advantage? For one, the return on invested capital is greater than the weighted average cost of capital, signifying that FedEx generates profits in excess of the capital required to generate those profits. It is essentially achieving superior performance. The weighted average cost of capital is less than the return on invested capital, which shows that there is positive economic profit. This metric displays how much wealth or value the company has created. It is clearly substantial. Lastly, Tobin's Q is greater than 1. This is yet another straightforward and clear indication that FedEx achieves superior performance. Supported by the adjusted accounting measures, we can safely state that FedEx achieves high levels of economic performance and has amassed a great amount of wealth and value. However, we must recognize the limitations of our calculations, as it only provides a general idea of how the company is performing. These metrics fail to give us any insight as to what exactly provides the firm with this superior performance. Which strategies have led to their profitability? Which resources? Could the firm's success be fostered and attributed to industrial and/or firm-level factors? To provide an accurate picture of FedEx, we must consider other analyses in conjunction with the adjusted accounting metrics.
What are FedEx's strengths? First of all, they are worldwide deployed. FedEx Express is one of the world's largest express transportation companies, providing fast and reliable delivery to every U.S. address and to more than 220 countries around the world. FedEx Express uses a global air and ground network to speed delivery of time-sensitive shipments, usually in 1 to 2 business days. It also has 400,000 employees to boot. Strong leadership. FedEx attracts the most talented employees around the world. This is mostly due to its history and its brand recognition that it's been able to foster. Results-oriented leader who, through demanding process improvement strategies, has been able to keep an organization that produces $58 billion revenue with very low defect rates. That's Fred Smith. Strong brand name. Captured the market and logistics due to its strong brand name. It was able to do from the ground floor due to Mr. Fred Smith's vision of what could be possible in delivery service. Through years of exceptional service locally and pushing the boundaries of what is possible in air shipping internationally, FedEx has surpassed the competition with its ever-expanding footprint. What are FedEx's weaknesses? First of all, they rely too heavy on the U.S. market. They must strategically expand internationally. Although the company operates across the world, it depends too heavily on the U.S. market for its revenues. Just in the year 2010, the market accounted for over 70% of the total revenue of the company. This overdependence restricts its market share and its future growth opportunities. Shrinking market growth. 6 years ago, FedEx's operating margin was a little bit over 5.5%, which was well below the mean average of 7%. This indicates an inefficient cost management or possibly a weak pricing strategy by the executive leadership. Due to the decline in operating margin, the company's compound annual growth rate is decreasing.
Continuing on in our SWOT analysis of FedEx, we've landed on opportunities. And I want to paint a quick landscape, give a picture of what opportunities exist. And in order for us to even have this conversation, we need to understand what's an opportunity. I also want to clarify what type of opportunities exist for FedEx, as well as really going deeper into how do these opportunities and taking advantage of these opportunities develop competitive advantage for FedEx. That's why we're here. That's what they're looking for. FedEx is not around just to exist. They want to grow. They want to develop. They want to gain that advantage. And I think by specifically understanding the opportunities in front of them, they're able to make those moves. So what is an opportunity? Merriam-Webster defines opportunities as a set of circumstances that make it possible to do something. All right, a broad stroke, I agree. And I don't enjoy the word circumstance here because it feels circumstantial, but you know what? Opportunities exist based on circumstances that exist. And I believe a lot of those circumstances are in fact in our control. We have the abilities to mold through taking risk by developing different people in different segments. And I think FedEx is making some great ground on that. So when we're talking about opportunities, I really want to talk about how FedEx can and is currently and will in the future shape circumstances that allow them to do something. And that something is namely engage in some level of competitive advantage. You see, opportunities, in my opinion, can be separated into two very distinct categories for FedEx. The first of which is viable opportunities, things that are right in front of them, which if they don't take advantage of can actually become a threat. And the second is future conceptual opportunities are based more on forecasting models, really big picture type conversations. For any other organization, UPS withstanding, air delivery and freight service is an incredibly competitive market that has about as much room for unique growth as a railroad business. And pardon the tongue in cheek, but as Solomon once said, what has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. You see, the difficulty with most logistics centers organizations is seeking truly unique opportunities while not abandoning your first love. You see, there's a reason FedEx is the leader in its industry, and that reason is it's successful. And that success is driven by its ability to understand the opportunities that are in front and the opportunities that are miles ahead. You see, I think that FedEx has taken risk. I think they've taken risk over the past decade, and you know what? Over the next decade, I think they'll continue to take those risks. And I don't mean that flippantly. Risk means the possibility of loss, but FedEx has just been incredibly successful at calculating and defining those risks, and really has created the giant that it is today. And the last thing I want to land on this page is how does taking advantage of those opportunities develop competitive advantage for FedEx? Logistics is complex, to say the very least, and FedEx's ability to not just adapt to what customers are looking for in the sense of live updates every second of the day. You check your email, you're clicking on the website, you want to see that box moved an extra mile. That type of drill down is something that's expected. But I don't want to talk about just what's expected because that's reactionary, and I don't believe that develops true competitive advantage for FedEx. We want to dig into what they can do now that helps to shape that industry, that helps to shape thought, and that in essence causes their competitors to take a step back and begin to mimic them, if only to keep up with where the industry is going. When we talk about opportunities, the conversation can quickly go from 1 hour to 1 week to 1 year. Really, the sky's the limit. This is a part of, I think, that executive conversation that engages the imagination. And I think that there are three specific growth opportunities that are right in front of FedEx that within the next year, I think that they could make significant strides, if not in mastering, then at least in growing and developing. Those three areas are growth in current markets. The second one is development of new markets, continue service rollout in existing markets. And the third is merging with existing competition in less than typical markets. Growth in current markets, that's something I think that FedEx is already engaging in. It's not just branding. Their trucks look great. I've seen some smaller format trucks in my area. But they've got to do more. I think that there has to be some integration that gives minute by minute updates versus these sort of bird's eye view of what's going on. People want to know where and what. We want to know where our stuff always is and what time it's going to be here. And we don't want a window, we want an exact time by FedEx engaging specifically with their technology to give a minute by minute live feed update of where someone's package is. Would be an incredible growth opportunity currently, and it actually ties into one of my future opportunities in the following slide. Don't want to get ahead of myself. Second one is development of new markets and continued service rollout in existing markets. There are places around the country, particularly in rural spaces, where FedEx does not exist. I mean, we'll go ahead and we'll throw out the extreme example of small towns up in Canada or places in Mexico where we don't yet have a presence, not to mention around the globe where we're involved in these major metropolitan type areas, but as you get further outside of those areas, it gets more difficult to have a large presence. Um, but what FedEx needs to do is continuing to roll out service in the markets that we have in the sense of expanding a coverage map, which leads me to my next opportunity, which is merging with existing competition in less than typical markets. If FedEx is smart, they know that they cannot service the world in the sense of being an only provider. But by taking the opportunity to partner in the sense of a merger um, with existing competition in some of these more rural type markets, places where it doesn't make sense for FedEx to jump in the deep end in, they can still have their hand in that business. It allows them to expand their coverage map while also supporting and developing shipping into some of these less than typical markets. Future opportunities are something that are really exciting conversations, again, engaging this imagination type. And I think there are three specific things that nothing that could be completed within the next year. However, things that I believe by FedEx setting their sights on will develop future success and advantage competitively. The first one is developing supply chain solutions from raw materials to final mile delivery globally. FedEx is known as an LTL carrier, a very popular LTL carrier, but I don't think of moving bulk popcorn, kerneled popcorn that is, so it's not palletized, it goes into bulk container. I don't think about moving that with FedEx, and I don't think other people do as well. It may be time for FedEx to get outside of this LTL world and begin to look like what would it look like to develop full truckload, specialized services, logging, petroleum-based tankers. There really is a lot you can do, and considering the incredible size of the transportation logistics pie, the $45 billion that FedEx brought in FY15 is only a piece of that pie, and I think that by developing their supply chain solution and really their enterprise-wide solution from just this pure LTL to this other more specialized market could be a huge plus. The second one is creating new markets through drones, non-company deliveries, and various freight movement opportunities. When we talk about freight movement opportunities, that really encompasses the idea of drones. Drones are popular now. Will they be popular next week? I don't know. But what I can say is they are popular now. And by engaging in that type of technology and incorporating that into, again, their enterprise solution, it may not be extremely profitable in the sense of revenue, but it is profitable because it's marketing. It's getting your brand out there and saying, hey, we're doing things, we're taking risks, we're willing to be exciting. The same thing is with non-company deliveries. Around the holidays, it's not uncommon to see a bunch of big box retailers piling in employees to release them after the holiday. And why they do that is because of the amount of movement that their stores see that they don't see the rest of the year. Transportation can be a bottleneck effect where if we're not preparing ourselves, and FedEx has a great opportunity to bring on this Uber type model where these are not full-time employees and they can come and actually deliver packages throughout that holiday season and other peak times of the year without the stress of having to have it on a FedEx truck with a FedEx driver. And again, it allows them to reach into places that they don't necessarily want to fully develop themselves. The last one is developing a presence in emerging markets and developed countries. What I intend is there are places around the world that are not sort of international powerhouses in the sense of development, and I think that by FedEx coming in now, developing a brand, being known as the company that moves things, they will be able to be around when those countries, begin to develop and begin to produce, and can go ahead and help move that freight. When we talk about threat, I think again it's important to define what we intend by threat. A threat is a hostile action on behalf of someone or something, usually done in some level of retribution. Now, when we talk about threats in regard to a corporate environment, it's not necessarily retribution against something. However, it's an outside force where there are alien actors actually doing something that causes you pain or injury, maybe even damage to your organization. And when we talk about FedEx and threats, I think it's important to understand how big FedEx is, but that it's not impervious to threat. We think of people like UPS and stateside, the United States Postal Service. Well, UPS is a global distribution network as well, and when we talk about this worldwide phenomenon of movement of freight and mail, there are also local people who do that as well. And stateside, we've got the Postal Service. But again, around the world, it exists. This competition has actually split market share. And given that one of the entities is usually owned by the government, it's actually created some hazards and threats in regards to legislation and government support of FedEx growth. You see, each of the three companies, UPS, FedEx, and then that local option, they have actually developed networks that include usually air freight movement and a final mile to your doorstep type delivery. All three brands can be incredibly reputable and have been in business and moving things usually for dozens of years. You see, it would seem that these competitors would enjoy life of an industry with an extremely high cost of entrance and lack of significant support for new entrants. Well, I think it's wrong. You see, the transportation industry is more than slightly volatile, and while there are only a handful of very large carriers at that top, FedEx one, the industry is extremely vulnerable, and even those at the top cannot hide. I think there are three important threats that we can look at for FedEx. The first is Amazon / new entrants. The second is legislation. And the third are external factors such as fuel, maintenance cost, and industry dynamics. Amazon is an interesting company, isn't it? If you saw their stock today, you really would think that they were ruling the world, but I believe a lot of what people invest in when they invest in Amazon is future growth, future opportunity. And when you look at the fact that they're beginning to get themselves into transportation logistics, it makes you take pause. Understanding how large this industry is and understanding that a large part of the success of the carriers within that industry are reliant upon large companies such as Amazon. It wasn't long ago that Walmart privatized its fleet and actually took quite a bit of revenue from the pockets of big transportation carriers around the country. And when we see people like Amazon doing the same thing, they're not creating new markets. They're further dividing that market share, thereby really threatening companies like FedEx. The second one is legislation. FedEx has to operate within the rules and boundaries set in the different countries that it's involved in, and that legislation can change at the drop of a dime. We've seen it stateside as we're looking at speed limiters, safety devices that are required, electronic logging devices, and that's just stateside. And there's a process in other parts of the country, the world, that process of legislation can be a little bit more convoluted, and FedEx is purely at the mercy of those with legislative power. The third one of those external factors, fuel, maintenance costs, and industry dynamics, all are things that FedEx does not have pure control over, but they're incredibly threatening. The cost of fuel is going down. That's a good thing for many carriers. It decreases revenue, but it also allows you to be a little more competitive with the rate that you're going to the customers, which has actually created a bit of a dip as far as rate nationwide and even worldwide. Maintenance costs change as equipment comes and equipment goes. FedEx has really got to recognize that they're making long-term investments into the pieces of equipment that they use: airplanes, trucks, different conveyor belt type system, warehousing. There's a lot of things that go into that, as a matter of fact, cost quite a bit of money. And the last one is industry dynamics. How people buy, dictates how people ship. FedEx has to really understand that and take that very, very seriously.
This table summarizes a 2016 industry report on global air freight from Business Source Premier. The threat of entry in this industry is assessed as weak according to this report. The main factors creating barriers to entry in the global air freight industry are high cost of entry and government policy. High costs are associated with the purchasing, maintenance, and fuel costs for aircrafts. Ability for firm growth is greatly impacted by the availability at airports and regulations imposed by national and local governments. Threat of rivalry in this industry is assessed as strong. The industry report stated the global air freight sector declined in value in 2012 and 2013. This situation was caused by two major factors: a weak world economy and fragile trade growth. This trend has, however, since reversed, and 2014 saw the market returning to growth again. Lack of differentiation contributes to the degree of rivalry in this industry. Brand loyalty is low due to low customer switching costs. The four leading companies identified in this report were Emirates Airline, FedEx Corporation, Korean Airlines, and UPS, or United Parcel Service. The threat of substitutes in this industry is assessed as moderate according to this report. Substitutes in the global air freight industry include road, rail, and marine transportation. Speed of delivery is the main variable affecting the choice between air freight and its substitutes. Lower costs associated with substitutes make them an attractive option when speed of delivery is not a factor. Threat of powerful suppliers. Supplier power in this industry is assessed as strong, according to this report. This is related to a number of suppliers in this industry being low. Key suppliers in this industry include planes, fuel, and airport services. Contracts required to buy or lease aircrafts create high switching costs for firms in this industry. Fuel needed for aircrafts is costly and has a limited number of suppliers. The availability of operational slots at airports are dependent upon airport traffic, and peak traffic times can slow down air freight operations. Also, forward and backward integration are unlikely. Threat of powerful buyers. Buyer power in this industry is assessed as moderate according to an industry report. Buyers in this industry are firms that require air cargo transportation. As the majority of buyers are corporate, their sizable purchases are important. However, due to high capital requirements for this industry, backward vertical integration is not likely. Despite this fact, we saw Amazon enter this industry in the beginning of 2016, and we would consider changing the threat of powerful buyers from moderate to strong.
In our analysis of Porter's 5 forces, according to the Global Air Freight Industrial Profile, we discussed that the threat of powerful buyers was rated as moderate. The report also stated that backward vertical integration, which would increase this threat, was nearly impossible in this industry because of the high capital requirements. However, we again believe that this threat warrants reevaluation. As we previously mentioned, Amazon recently announced that it would be developing its own shipping sector, a form of backward vertical integration. Amazon is now embarking on a journey that has been deemed impossible by many, but has been a great topic of debate in terms of how it will affect the freight industry, namely its two key players, FedEx and UPS. Some argue that it would take years and massive amounts of capital, in the billions, for Amazon to successfully develop its own shipping business comparable to FedEx or UPS. Of note, Deutsche Post DHL Express attempted to do this in the 2000s, but clearly failed. Amazon is wading in risky waters. FedEx's CFO, Alan Graf, provided his thoughts on Amazon's newest endeavor. He stated that, and I quote, "The level of global investment in facilities, sorting, aircraft, vehicles, people to replicate the service we provide, or our primary competitor provides is just daunting, and frankly, in our view, unrealistic. We've been doing this for 40 years. It seems that FedEx executives do not see it as much of a threat, but we would argue otherwise, as the growth of e-commerce has been a driving force for both FedEx and UPS's bottom line. With the threat of Amazon's backward vertical integration, it will become critical that FedEx maintains its profitability by neutralizing this threat. One of the strategies that FedEx can and seems to be actively engaging in is tacit collusion. This is a firm-level cooperative strategy where firms in a single industry increases prices above competitive level as to decrease the level of competitiveness. In tacit collusion, the firms are essentially coordinating pricing and production indirectly by observing output and pricing decisions of the other participating firms. We specifically want to mention that there is another form of collusion, explicit collusion. This is when firms directly negotiate production output and pricing agreements. We need to highlight a key difference here. Explicit collusion involves direct negotiations with the other firms. It is also important to note that this form of collusion is illegal. On the other hand, tacit collusion could be equated to an unspoken alliance between firms and is therefore legal. It is this form of collusion we would recommend FedEx engage in. But it seems that FedEx is already engaging in this strategy. This is supported by the historical trends of these two companies. Since 2006, FedEx and UPS have moved in unison to increase their delivery rates. Over the past 10 years, both companies have increased their rates by totals ranging from 38.5 to 91.5%, depending on the parcel and service. Now with the threat of Amazon, FedEx and UPS have reported to increase their rates by 4.9%. Tacit collusion? It seems very likely. Of course, there are risks associated with tacit collusion, the risk of cheating and misinterpretation. In any strategy that FedEx engages in, there will always be risks involved. The company will just need to find ways to neutralize it. But we do not feel that FedEx needs to avoid this strategy merely on the risks. Instead, we can argue that there is very low concern for these risks, given UPS and FedEx's long history of increasing prices in concert. Considering the low risk, the impending threat of Amazon's vertical integration, the deep and arguably successful history of the two companies implicitly engaging in tacit collusion, the benefits heavily outweigh the risks. We would then recommend that FedEx continue to engage in tacit collusion in order to maintain their profitability and success, particularly with the threat of Amazon. Lastly, we should quickly mention cost leadership, yet another strategy firms may implement to gain competitive advantage within an industry. FedEx has proven the effectiveness of their cost leadership time after time, which makes the Amazon seem like less of a threat. An example of FedEx's cost leadership resources would be the learning curve, which also affects economies of scale. FedEx has been a freight titan for 45 years, while Amazon has only been a successful e-commerce retailer for the past 22 years. It is also just now developing its own shipping service. With significantly less experience with courier services, Amazon has yet to reap the economies of scale that FedEx currently enjoys. It's a possibility that Amazon will never be able to experience economies of scale. This keeps FedEx's strategy of cost leadership in play. Therefore, we would recommend that FedEx continue to maintain their cost leadership to help neutralize the threat of Amazon.
In the last few years, we have seen a sharp incline in amateur drone sales. These drones have been for recreational use, but lately the opportunity of... So what's all this drone fuss about anyways? How does this drone work? It's the drone ecosystem that provides this service. Amateur drones. The drones are a remote-controlled pilotless aircraft or missile. A dramatic increase in interest in the last few years, but there are many barriers standing in the way of these companies successfully rolling out the plan to create this market nationwide or abroad. One of the drones with specialized cameras attached capture raw video and data at increased rates, which is now the industry standard. Drone infrastructure and package delivery companies are now angling for waivers with the government, largely to operate out of line of sight, using small tests to collect. For example, Amazon, the online retail giant, which currently relies on courier companies to deliver its packages, last year the Memphis Experiment Drone Pilot Program. FedEx can develop a pilot program for the Memphis area. As the official first step,
in the Porter's five-force analysis of the global air freight industry, it was identified that there is a strong threat of rivalry in this industry. One of the contributors to the strong threat of rivalry in this industry was lack of differentiation. Product differentiation is a strategy that firms can use to gain the competitive advantage. If there is nothing unique that FedEx is offering compared to its competitors, and there are low customer switching costs, then it becomes easy to lose business to competing firms. There are many ways that firms can choose to differentiate. It's important to highlight that product differentiation is a matter of customer perception. Therefore, our goal is to convince FedEx's customers that their product is more valuable than their rivals. Another way that firms can differentiate their products is through linkages with other firms. Our suggestion is that FedEx create a strategic alliance with a ride-hailing service to provide on-demand local deliveries. Of these services, we propose that Uber is the best option for a strategic alliance. Uber is already providing a service called Uber Rush, which provides an on-demand courier service. Uber is a new organization and would benefit from the brand recognition and reputation that an alliance with FedEx would bring them. FedEx would benefit from the access to Uber's drivers when their delivery drivers are unable to meet demand. FedEx's Executive Vice President Michael Glenn was quoted in a USA Today article saying, "Research has indicated time and time again that a uniformed person with proper identification showing up at your doorstep is an important issue for customers." This highlights another potential incentive for Uber to align with FedEx. Uber may find value in the potential to learn about driver training from FedEx. This could help to increase customer trust in Uber delivery drivers. Looking into the future, another possible differentiation strategy for FedEx would be a joint venture with Uber. Recently, Uber published a white paper on their website describing plans for their next project, Uber Elevate. This 98-page document describes Uber's plan for an on-demand air travel and the development of their new electric aircraft called VTOL. This stands for Vertical Takeoff and Landing. If Uber is successful in the development and regulation of their aircraft, this could change the speed of delivery in monumental ways. A joint venture with Uber would allow FedEx to invest in this emerging technology, and Uber would be able to learn from FedEx's knowledge and connections related to aircrafts and regulation. A recent article by Graham Warwick in Aviation Week in Space Technology states that FedEx says it has 5 projects underway in unmanned aircraft and vehicles. Graham goes on to say that some of these household names are no strangers to aviation. FedEx, UPS, DHL, and now even Amazon operate large fleets of cargo aircraft, but their broad interest in using unmanned systems for logistics is creating a demand for technology that goes well beyond buying more Airbus and Boeing freights. Therefore, this joint venture would also allow FedEx to learn from Uber's revolutionary technology and potentially help them in their drone efforts. According to a USA Today article from June of 2015, it was stated, without mentioning Uber or Amazon by name, Glenn brushed off the prospect of a big new techie competitor. This article is referring to FedEx's Executive Vice President Michael Glenn. It has been over a year since this article was published. Given the success of Amazon and Uber over this time, we would encourage Mr. Glenn to reevaluate the threat of these firms. With Amazon quickly becoming identified as a new rival, FedEx will need to assess differentiation strategies that will allow them to remain relevant. If FedEx opposes a strategic alliance or joint venture with Uber, then an alternative option would be a vertical integration strategy where FedEx would develop their own electric aircraft in order to compete with Uber Elevate. Such a project would be a large undertaking. As outlined in Uber's white paper, the project would not only involve the development of the aircraft, but also the implementation of infrastructure to support it, as well as approval from regulatory agencies. For this reason, we feel a joint venture would be a more appealing option. However, there is also the possibility that Uber will reject the idea of a joint venture. Therefore, it is important to present this as an alternative option. Speed of delivery has always been an important focus for FedEx, and any technology that seeks to improve this effort should be investigated in order to sustain competitive advantage. Again, we want the customer to perceive that FedEx has something more valuable to offer than its rivals. We feel that exploring a differentiation strategy that focuses on these new technologies will add the value that FedEx customers are looking for.
From 2006 to 2015, the global logistic volume is increasing every year. Compared to volume of $6.6 trillion in 2009, the volume of 2015 is increased by 39.49%. Regarding geography distribution, Asia has the biggest market share of 44%. North America is 25%. Europe is 23%. South America has the lowest number, only 8%. Regarding country distribution, in 2013, China's logistic industrial market share reached $1.59 trillion US. It is 18.6% globally. The next is the US market. It reached $1.36 trillion US. It is 15.8% globally. Now let's take a look at FedEx sales by geography. From the table, we can figure out even though FedEx operates across the world, serving over 220 countries internationally, but it still depends heavily on the US market. For example, in 2015, the US market accounted for over 72.2% of the total revenue. Over-dependence on US market puts the company at a risk, as any political economic change in the region could have an adverse impact on the company's business. So FedEx must make a change on strategies on international market. As we know, FedEx had already acquired TNT in May 2016 for expanding European market, but it is still not enough yet. China market should not be ignored because China market is a huge potential market for FedEx global strategy. Now let's see the China market. From 2006 to 2015, China GDP grows every year. The average growth rate is 6.7%. In 2015, the GDP is $10,866.44 billion US, and also the logistic accounts for 12.8% of the whole GDP. Below two tables show us how China logistic industry is growing. From 2008 to 2014, delivery packet was increased to 14 billion from 1.5 billion. Total revenue was increased to 204.5 billion Chinese yuan from 48 billion Chinese yuan. In order to help FedEx to determine the strategy in China market, we have to do following analysis. The strength. The first strength is a great brand name. FedEx is one of the world's largest express companies, like they did in US market and other places. It's a brand name in China market as well. With a positive impact of a brand, FedEx could get more advantage of competence in China market. Another strength is experience. FedEx entered China market as early as 1984 than other international competitors such as UPS and DHL. FedEx got a lot of experience and better understanding on China market than others. FedEx is more likely to be successful than others in China market. The weakness. Not like US market, there are only several hubs in big cities in China, such as Beijing and Shanghai. All the FedEx stations also built in those big cities. They can only cover a very small portion of the whole market. Besides, infrastructure like highway construction is still underdeveloped in some areas. They are not perfect and ready for express industrial. Opportunity. The first opportunity is China is the world's fastest growing e-commerce market. In 2016, the e-commerce market will reach at 280 billion Chinese yuan, increased by 39% compared with 2015. Currently, there are more than 500 million internet users in China. It is the biggest online population in the world, in which 28% or 145 million people shop online. 70% of transactions depends on logistics to complete. Now, e-commerce transaction volume has surpassed the United States and become the world first. In the future, this trend will keep going up. The second opportunity is China's Western development strategy, because economic development in China's central and eastern area left behind other eastern areas. Under this strategy, more and more manufacturers and companies in China will move their bases from eastern areas to western areas. There will be growing logistic demand for fast and reliable international express in those areas. The threat. The first threat is government regulation. Chinese government regulation cannot be ignored. In order to protect local logistic business, the Chinese government built barriers to restrict physical access to suppliers, customers, and partners for international companies. The resource they could use is very limited. The second stress is strong local competitors. The domestic delivery market is very competitive with a lot of strong local companies. Those local companies have grown up with the market. They have strong ties in the community, and everyone in China is pulling for domestic companies to succeed. The third one is the size of the market. So let's think about China's geography. While the country as a whole is larger than the United States, most of the population is squeezed into an area that is about the size of Western Europe. The challenge is capacity, which is unable to meet demand. This capacity issue can be anything from the availability of slot at an airport to congestion on roads and railways. Tra- Transportation and infrastructure are also undeveloped in some areas outside of major cities. This makes it difficult for domestic delivery. Below is my recommendation for FedEx in China market. First, emerge with major competitors. There are two major competitors in China, Shunfeng Express and Shenzhou Express. They are taking 18% and 12% of total market share respectively. Both companies are expanding their business into international markets. The same as FedEx in China, they are all new for international markets. FedEx could help them grow in international markets with FedEx experience. In return, those companies could help FedEx grow in China market. Second, acquire small-size competitors. There are hundreds of express companies in China. Many small-sized companies are very hard to survive. They are eager to looking for an opportunity to work with a big company like FedEx. Third, work with e-commerce giant. Alibaba is the biggest e-commerce company. It contributes most of the total online sales. Also, Taobao and Jingdong are another two leading e-commerce companies. Like UPS did for Amazon, if FedEx could be shipping partner with those three leading companies, the situation of FedEx in China will be changed dramatically.
The future is bright for FedEx. That is undoubted. There's an incredible amount of opportunity as well as an incredible amount of risk, as we've seen from stateside ventures as well as overseas ventures into countries like China. One thing is for certain, though, FedEx is a giant, and if they continue at the pace that they're moving now, it'll be quite interesting to see where they land in the next few years. On behalf of the team, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to present, and we wish you the best over this holiday season.